Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. We're going to be covering the Trumna today. This is a heavily requested weapon. Figured I'd go ahead and get this one done. Um, this has been requested multiple times over the past year since I've been making videos, and is probably one of the stronger alt fires. This is from Deimos. I think you need level 3 in Trotty standing, but it's an MR13 weapon. So we will be doing a star chart build, but we're mostly going to be talking about Steel Path because that's where this weapon sort of needs the galvanized mods. But this is a very, very strong weapon, considering with the alt fire considered. Frankly, it's one of the few weapons that without much work can like one-shot acolytes. So that is going to be its big selling point in terms of like quote-unquote intended gameplay. That being said, there are interactions with say like Zada or like Zephyr, for example, like the tornadoes. This weapon does incredibly well with Zephyr. Easily able to one-shot level cap with an alt fire build. So let's go over the basics. We'll do the new bro build. Not going to be too much of a surprise. So this is going to be a primed mod free build. So base damage, always good. This weapon has... Actually, before covering the build, we'll talk about the weapon modes itself, right? So this weapon has 4 sources of damage. It has a full auto primary. The stats are pretty simple. 24% crit chance, 2.2 crit multiplier, 30% status chance. And the direct hit on the primary fire is impact heat only. You gain a little AoE. It's very tiny, 1.6. It kind of looks like a legendary core, which is kind of nice. But it also has its own heat-based AoE. So that's pretty nice if you're trying to stack heat dots. You can stack up heat dots very, very quickly on this. So on the secondary, which in order to gain access to it, this weapon is sort of like the spiritual predecessor to the Incarnon weapons. And let's go ahead. It's easier to show what it does. We'll pick something weak. And we'll do some butchers. Pull in a bunch of them. And actually, let's get rid of the Panzer, because as weak as these guys are, they will get one shot. Alright, easy enough. So it's got this little charge mechanic underneath it. It's a bar that fills on kill, not on damage, which is kind of sad. Get a couple of kills. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you get an alt fire. Shoots this grenade that bounces. A couple of times, it's not going to bounce an insane amount of times, but there are ways you can direct it. So you have the direct hit, you have the AoE on the primary. The secondary has a direct hit and an AoE. The AoE on the secondary is actually pretty nice. And even with no damage mods at all, or any mods at all, you saw it got like a 7k crit, 5k base damage. It's really, really nice. So we're actually, in terms of the final build goal, we're going to be building specifically for refilling the alt fire. It's not going to change too much, but we're going to be building a corrosive build so that we can get the alt fire as fast as possible, so we're not really going to be going for too much into dots. But let's cover the basics. So serration, crit chance, crit damage, and we have multi-shot, and then we'll go for corrosive, and this is probably the first main area where it might vary from what you see on like build guides. If you do have primed mods, and we'll come back to it, primed cryo for viral heat is definitely a good option. Let's go with actually a 90 mod. We'll do electricity because high voltage is barrel. Okay, so Nubro friendly. So base damage, crit chance, crit damage, multi-shot, corrosive from Stormbringer and Malignant Force. Malignant Force is available in the Void from Corrupted Vor. Gonna need that fire rate, of course. You do have the option of going Vile Acceleration here. Just because of how much the weapon needs fire rate. If you have this from the vaults, this is definitely an option, and I would recommend it, honestly. Otherwise, you're going to go speed trigger. You're probably sitting on a stack of these anyway. But Vile Acceleration would be a nice upgrade to this, just because the weapon needs fire rate so much. And the final one is just going to be our handy-dandy ammo mutation. Right in here, this is going to require, I think, 2 Forma. But no Exilus slot, obviously no arcane. Very, very basic. No bounty mods or anything. You'll be able to pick up all of these. And let's see what our damage is. So 2,500 on a crit, 509, obviously against very weak enemies. And the alt fire, just shy of 100k. So easy enough. Obviously those are level 1, so everything looks fantastic, but just giving you an idea of what close to the raw damage it's doing. So the issue that we're going to be balancing with this weapon is that, Jesus Christ, this weapon has a ton of recoil. So we are eventually going to have to deal with it, but right now we're not. Okay, just because of like modding availability and the recoil reduction mods basically revolve around Deadhead Arcane. There is also, I think it's Vile Precision, which is minus 90% weapon recoil, but it also gives us minus fire rate, so we're not doing that. There could be an argument for running, was it the Vile mod that we were talking about earlier? Vile Acceleration and Vile Precision. But that might lead you Forma-wise into a wrong build. This weapon needs a lot of V polarities. So the next mod, if you have it, would be Hunter Munitions. It's such a core upgrade to this weapon. It's hard to justify anything else being here. Still, so we just added our first bounty mod in. You decided to invest in an Exilus adapter. So still nothing fancy. I think the hardest mod to get here is Split Chamber, actually. Just because it's like RNG, and Speed Trigger, I think, is RNG also. But Malignant Force, run a couple of captures in the Void, and you should eventually be sitting on a stack of these. But Hunter Munitions is a bounty mod from Cetus. So easy enough. We're going to up the level of the enemy, stop hitting weak stuff, go back to Steel Path, max level, so we can get an idea of what the damage is. So 580 is what I'm seeing. Hunter Munitions is doing quite a bit. It's where most of our damage right now is coming from. Let's get some headshots. 3,400. 3,482 is what it looks like. And again, you can see our main issue is going to be recoil. And the reload also. But there's going to be a trick that we're going to use to minimize this garbage recoil, because it's a couple seconds long. It's definitely a reduction in your damage. So we'll get our 5 kills, and then we'll shoot the alt fire. The one thing that does compensate for the long reload is literally just how big the magazine is. Even though the reload is incredibly long, you do have a ton of time where you're just holding the trigger. So, like, percentage-wise, it's not that big of a deal. And in all of the builds, we're actually not gonna mod for reload time. Because the reload is going to be pretty annoying. Alright, last enemy. Alright, easy enough. So 3,482 was a headshot crit. Obviously, that's pretty nice. And alt fire is 4,200. And slash ticks are 2,400 and 23k. So the alt fire is obviously the high damage bread and butter in terms of like single instance of damage. Now the thing is that the alt fire does not stack its own passive, right? Because you actually don't gain the charge icon underneath when you kill with your alt fire. So you have to kill with the primary, and if you can't fire the alt fire and then bullet hose down the enemy, as soon as you hit it with the alt fire, you're not gaining any charges from that enemy. Obviously Zephyr is either busted with it or not. So the one variation to this setup, where it's the normal new bro friendly setup, right? Is because we're dealing with Hunter Munitions, you can swap over to Prime Cryo and do viral heat. It's a very potent combination, and provided you're not running a Panzer, right? If you're not using a Panzer, and you might not have it, because if you're farming this and you just pick it up, the Panzer is something you have to get with standing also. But as soon as you get the Panzer, you swap over to Corrosive. But before the Panzer, it's viral. So it's Corrosive after you get the Panzer. But before that, you do viral, because the Panzer is going to be giving you viral. So pretty easy. Since the Panzer is giving viral, we swap to Corrosive so we can get another stat and another form of damage increase. Since we're going to be getting the 10 stacks of viral damage to health bonus already, we want to go to what's going to help penetrate the armor and give us another form of shred. So let's go ahead and we'll kill a couple enemies with this. We'll do this one. The damage is going to show on the raw hit as less. Like you see now, we're only doing like 193. But the slash ticks are significantly higher, right? Like, obviously that makes sense, because we were killing with Corrosive before. Now we're using viral, and heat is giving us a damage dot, which is getting boosted by viral, and the armor shred from heat is helping boost our damage a little bit, but obviously it's not going to compensate for like a Corrosive armor strip. So pretty basic. And for if you're running this and you're doing like regular start chart stuff, you're basically done. Okay. The only real thing to add for regular star chart is if Barrow shows up, make sure to get primed cryo rounds. This is definitely worth it. It's a big damage increase. It's not going to increase your slash procs though. But in terms of like a straight up damage increase, it's kind of hard to beat it. So if we incorporate vault mods, so we haven't completed the star chart yet, right? Your next upgrade would be crit delay, which would go here. So crit delay gives us a higher crit chance. Now 12% isn't that big of a deal, but on the alt fire, it's almost 20. And it will push us into the point where we could potentially get reds, or not reds, oranges. So it matters a lot there, especially with the alt fire, because we're just trying to stack the charges so we can get the alt fire, and we want the alt fire to hit as hard as possible. So pretty basic. We do lose a little bit of DPS on the fire rate, but it's not that bad, especially because we've compensated with like prime cryo rounds. So still star chart mods. We haven't done anything fancy yet, but it does require a Barrow visit and a little bit of RNG from running vaults on Deimos as well. So we went from like 190 to, what does it look like, 260? And the slash ticks are 1500. Sienna 3k. I can't see the heat dot. Let's do a headshot. 1500. Yeah, slash tick's putting in a lot of work for us. Reload's still nasty. Let's get one more kill, and then we'll do the alt fire. Alright, we got our full charge. So generally, if you're trying to maximize damage onto a single target, and this is going to matter when you're going from regular star chart, and you start out with Steel Path, if you are using the Trumna, how you're going to use it to maximize your damage against an enemy called an Acolyte is you're going to make sure that you have your charges on your alt fire. And what you're going to do is you're going to put a couple of shots and you're going to self-prime with the primary. Just fire some shots into the Acolyte and then alt fire. It's pretty basic, and it's how you're going to do most of your damage against higher value targets. And as you're running around, you'll charge it up on like trash mobs and whatnot. And if you see like an Eximus or something, self-prime again, and then hit them with the alt fire. If it's like a Nox Eximus or an Acolyte or something. Pretty basic. Even then, so let's scale it again, because we're going to swap back to Corrosive. We are going to incorporate the Panzer now. Because this is going to be like an arbitration, Steel Path tier build, if you will. If it will equip. There we go. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slot our arcane in. And there's more or less two different builds that we're going to focus on, and we're going to discuss them. But the first thing we need to discuss is I brought up that we're going to be focusing on the primary fire in terms of its damage. We are never going to mod specifically for the radial attack on the primary. And there's two main reasons for it. Let me remove all of this, actually. And we will do multi-shot. And more multi-shot. And to show, we are going to do heavy caliber. Okay, so we're pretty inaccurate now, right? So we have 2.5 multi-shot and heavy caliber to give us decreased accuracy, and it just absolutely tanks it. It doesn't really matter that much. So here's the issue, and this is why you never mod for the radial on the primary, just to cover it, right? So we can see here that there's 2 bullets. Okay, 50% chance for 3. We'll shoot again. Clearly multiple hits. Now we're going to back way up. And we're going to shoot. You only get 1 AoE. It's the same issue as the Opticore. So we're never going to give a shit about it. We're just going to use it for free heat ticks when they trigger, right? Just to help out a little bit. But we're never going to mod for this. And plus the range is really small, but the idea of it being like some Brahma-like effect, if you will, it doesn't deal enough damage. It is a little bit of a nice bonus. We're obviously going to get a boost due to base damage, and like if you decide to go with like a heat build, it'll definitely help it out. But the fact is that you only get 1 AoE from the radial on the primary fire. That is not the case on the alt fire, because that's grenade based. The AoE on the primary only appears to trigger once. So we're never going to mod for that, and that's the logic behind that, should you want to know. So back to the regular build. Okay, so we got primary Merciless on, so that means Serration goes away. Now there's 2 build. Let's do our other replacement. Galvanized Chamber is a direct upgrade to Split Chamber. You get this from Arbitrations. Make sure to go get it. Actually, let's just strip everything off. Okay, so we have Merciless. Galvanized Chamber is a direct upgrade to Split Chamber. As soon as you get this, you're going to use it for forever. It is 100% worth the Forma. And our other new mod is going to be, where are you? Galvanized Aptitude. Okay. Stacks with Merciless. Always a good time. And we are going to be doing a Corrosive build. And this is up to you on whether you want a mod for Corrosive Heat. I am going to be going for Corrosive Hunter Munitions. So Corrosive Hunter Munitions. That gives us 5 of our 8 mods. Obviously, the other 2 are going to be centered around crit. Exilus is obviously ammo mutation. Ammo max is 400. The magazine is 200. So you basically get 2 big magazines. And the final one is going to be your flavor of fire rate. Whichever one you like. If you have Prime Shred, would obviously go on. But if you're doing Steel Path, you probably have something like Vial Acceleration. If you don't want to mess around with that, you can do Speed Trigger. But I like Vial Acceleration. Until you start incorporating like Arcane Acceleration, like actually on the frame. If you don't want to do Arcane Acceleration, or your build on your frame needs 2 Arcanes, Vial Acceleration is a super good option. So pretty basic still. Multi-shot, base damage, way better status chance. We're at 90% on the primary, so it's going to be super good at adding statuses on. So it's going to be a quick 10 stacks of Corrosive, couple of stacks of Impact, and some heat for additional armor shred. But more importantly, if we look at the alt fire, the status chance isn't that big of a deal. Just going to be serious. The crit chance and the crit multiplier, though, are more for Hunter Munitions, and trying to get the slash ticks and the direct impact to the point where it can straight up one-shot stuff. Okay. And obviously, in terms of like alternatives, just for actually, I don't think I need it for this. The Corrosive, you could also do Stormbringer here if you don't have high voltage, right? So just for polarity issues, we'll do this. Okay. So pretty basic. We gain back a little bit of damage, getting rid of vile acceleration. Not a big deal. We take a bit of hit and fire rate, but we do get compensated with a higher corrosive weighting, which is going to help out with our raw damage a little more, right? So pretty basic still, but we scale. This is going to be able to take us through the star chart. No issues. Let's get some new nerds in here. And this is still building 101, right? We'll wait for the Panzer to quit doing its taxes. Come on, buddy. Thank you. Alright, so we're still stacking, but the damage that I'm seeing is 27k on headshots, 2k, 4k, 4500 on body shots, and orange is 18, 1900. Sorry, 6500 on an orange on a body shot. So the damage is starting to go up. And let's see what the alt fire is. We'll prime. Easy hit. That looked to be around 45k. There was a little baby red crit for 118k. Obviously the vigilante set doing some work for us, which I appreciate. All crit tiers welcome, obviously. So against 195 exos, steel path enabled in the simulacrum, the build's pretty basic still. One of the additional variations, and this was the build from, like if you don't like using the Panzer, admittedly the best upgrade you could do is to just incorporate in primed cryo. It's still not a bad build if you don't like the Panzer. It's got higher modded damage, but because you're going to be getting viral from the Panzer, if you're running that also, you're not going to be getting the damage to health boost that you would from the Panzer and the viral stacks, and the armor shred from the corrosive. You're just going to be getting viral with the viral damage boost to health, and the little bit of armor shred where it cuts the armor in half from heat. So it's mostly going to be 100 munitions proc machine, right? Pretty basic. And this is another popular build. But just in terms of like just being transparent, I'm not a fan of running viral on my primary unless it's like a level cap build where I'm intending to like full strip enemies. So the raw hit is hitting for, I mean, we're still stacking, but it's going to be a little tough. So 2k, I saw a 16k that had to have been an HM proc on the head. 23k on an HM proc on the head. 31k. Alright, easy enough. We got our abilities stacked up. So the dots, 35k. Got a little 4k, probably just a little heat dot there. Let's see if we can stack it up again. And one of the nice things is the dots do count toward the little charge at the bottom, right? Alright, so the slash dot was 56k, heat dot's hitting for about 2300. It's okay damage. And because of how finicky the alt fire is, because the multi-shot causes those little grenades that you drop out that bounce to basically go everywhere. You're basically relying on a single instance of damage, and this is actually the logic that we're going to use to mod for Corrosive over doing viral, because when you do the alt fire, right, you want that shit to hit as hard as possible. Now the other issue, and one of the final tweaks for like the Steel Path build, is killing Acolytes. Okay, this build right here is perfectly fine. If you want like a more direct upgrade, you would also do Prime Shred, but this is a login reward. You gain another multiplier, right? So this would be like an actual Steel Path build if you wanted to go merciless. One of the things that also helps, and I don't mind it with this weapon, is when you swap over to Corrosive, you gain a lot of raw damage against Grenier. Is Deadhead works wonders on this weapon because the recoil is so high. Right? Minus 50% recoil. You remember it jumping around before when I was aiming? Just swapping over to Deadhead. Yeah, it's nowhere near as bad. Getting the headshots is going to be significantly easier. I don't know if you can hear it triggering, but the headshots are way easier. So if you want to build like an Acolyte killing Trumna, you need to go Corrosive. Point blank, right? One of the things, and eventually I'm gonna... Actually, we can just talk about it now, not eventually. We'll just talk about it now. I think I have it on Nezha. Yeah, acceleration. Most of the time, I wouldn't recommend running double fire rate. But because this weapon starts out so slow and its magazine is so big, I'm actually regularly running acceleration and like Prime Shred on this build at the same time. And let me show you the damage difference. It's super noticeable. And I'll abuse the little trick I'm going to bring up. I mean, at most, the trick to deal with the ammo and how we're never going to mod for it is something you're probably running already. Alright, so the primary fire, if you remember before, was hitting just under the couple of thousands. Orange crit is an 81k. The damage is way, way nicer. Especially with the headshot multiplier. Yeah, still a couple thousand on yellows. 34k on a headshot. Alt fire. 43k, 51k. 115k slash tick. So the damage is getting pretty usable. Like if you're hitting like 100k or something like that, that'll 2-tick most Eximus when you're running Steel Path, right? So the build philosophy is pretty simple. Now there's a couple of things that need to be noted, and one, first and foremost, is this massive ass reload. Okay, it's 5 fucking seconds. You can do your taxes during this reload, but there are some tools that we can use to help this out. And for those of you that don't mind, like, actions per minute. It's the synth set. I mean, obviously, that's not like a big brain take, but 20% of the magazine reloaded per second while holstered. Now, the on bullet jump, I don't care about. But the reload, when you run the full synth set, is 20%, which means every second you're getting 40 ammo. And there is a bit of a minimum, and I'll show that. We'll expend most of our magazine. Okay, so we're at 50, right? I'm gonna double tap the swap, right? And it's almost 30 ammo. Just a quick double tap on F. And it's like 30 ammo. So if you're, even if you're running double fire rate, if you're priming, it is really easy to keep your ammo up. So say you're shooting, prime, swap back, you're already back to 200, prime. I'm at 200 the entire time. Back to 200. Right? Back to 200. So pretty basic. If you run, I would say you would probably need three of them, right? If you're running the Panzer, you've got two of them on there anyway. But three does feel a little bit nicer. Obviously, the frame Exilus synth mod is kind of a meme. And would ideally, if you had to pick, would probably be the easiest choice for the one to ditch. Plus 40% bullet jump for 2 seconds. Yeah, this can go. But just showing how fast it reloads with the full 4 is really, really quick. But to be honest, you would probably just get rid of reflex. And you could also do probably Vigilante's Pursuit. Little bit of extra crit chance, never hurt anybody's feelings. And plus extra enemy radar. It's not exactly a negative. So get the Vigilante set going a little more, 10% chance. You'll start seeing those reds a little bit more. So it is a tiny bit of a DPS increase, but let's be honest, crit tiers are crit tiers, and if you RNG a orange to a red on the alt fire, way better damage. So this is probably about the most exciting like primary fire for Steel Path. So what else can we do like to boost the damage? Obviously you've got your eclipses, you've got your roars. I'm actually a bit of a fan of Zada's Whisper with this. And I'll show you why. There's a reason why I grabbed Nausea. This is actually my Acolyte killer. Let's knock out some nerds real quick. Okay, easy enough. Did you see him stay on it? Yeah, they don't go anywhere, and they'll just re-hit. There's nothing I can spawn in the simulacrum that could take, like, all of those bounces. But Zada's traps the balls in there and allows them to hit. And I can't tell you how much of a fan of that setup I am. Hold on. Easy enough. We'll do our reload. Alright, easy enough. Zada's. And as soon as the enemy's dead, the balls will drag onto something else. Zada's allows them to do a ton of damage. Obviously on top of something that has a crap ton of crit tier, crit damage multiplier anyway, it's obviously a good time. So now let's specifically talk about the purpose of why most people like this, and it's because of the Acolyte. And it'd probably be easier if I actually just go into a Steel Path mission. Yeah, let's just go into a Steel Path mission. Maybe we can RNG a quick one from the Zeraman. Fuck it, we'll do it live. See if we can get one of those 1 minute Echo spawns. Alright, Steel Path on. I didn't even check what the enemy was. And it doesn't matter, but...
The art of combat must be practiced to truly master the canvas of war.
Alright, so we're still getting 20k oranges against shields, obviously not stellar. But now that we're closer to a proper bullet hose, it'll be doing pretty good. Alright, so I guess we're getting a normal Acolyte spawn. So we'll just keep going through the mission like normal. But the damage, even when modded for Corrosive against, you know, Corpus, because we're not dealing with like faction mods, right? Which I guess does bring me up to another topic we could talk about. Rivens for this are extraordinarily fucking cheap. Like, there is a incredibly useful +3 Riven for 100p on the market right now. I'm not gonna call the guy out, but like, it's 100p and it's literally the 3 positives you would want. It's like Toxin, crit chance, plus damage to Grenier. Because this weapon is kind of meant for killing Grenier. Well, I guess Grenier and Infested, right? Yeah, normal Acolyte spawn this time. Let's grab our charge real quick. Oh god, it's Malice. Run away. Alright. Yep, we bubbled. We'll ditch that. Prime, prime, prime. Alright, we did get a bad bounce. But easy enough nonetheless. But still, the alt fire, I'm a big fan of it. Game breaking, no. It feels really good to use though. And I guess that's the only thing that matters, right? And the tiny AoE that it has, admittedly, does help out a ton. The tiny AoE does help out a ton with enemies behind shields. Alright, so we got our Acolyte. It was essentially, what, like a 3 or 4 shot? Didn't get the 1 shot. Because I screwed up the bounce and shot it into a wall. But you can see the damage. It's not bad. But let's say we wanted to build more around the Acolyte 1 shot. And we didn't mind aiming. Well, frankly, if we were trying to build straight up like 1 shot potential, we're going to need crit. And we're going to need crit, a lot of crit. So let's talk about the Acolyte 1 shot build, where it helps out a ton. Helps get those reds. Pretty basic. So what's going to go? We're going to use Prime Shred. You might be a little dependent. I don't have any elements on my Riven. But when doing this sort of build, if you really want to go heavy into the crit, to help out with the Acolyte 1 tap, this is where my Riven is crit chance, fire rate, reload speed. For just like a really generic primary fire runner gun. Having an element on the Riven, like Toxin or Electricity, would help out a shit ton. Okay. But the one thing we're going to look for is we're actually going to go Galvanized Scope. Okay. Pretty basic. We're just trying to get headshots. We're trying to get reds. The crit chance with just crit delay is 114. You can see what it is without. 38. We got a good chance to hit reds, right? So the theory is you stack up the elements that the Acolyte is weak against. Now it's got armor, right? So you need to hit it with Corrosive. And you try to hit it with the hardest hit you possibly can. So having polarity issues, Malignant Force, if you really wanted to go into this and you really like the fact that you can one-shot Acolytes with this, it would be 290s, admittedly. And the build would work something like this. Obviously, we're going to stack up Deadhead. We're going to... Oh, hold on. I only spawned in 4. Kill, kill, kill. Now, obviously, this we're leaning more into the crit chance itself. Let's go ahead and get some stacks. We'll boost our damage. What are we at? 1. It's not really helpful. Alright, 2 stacks will have to do. So with the alt fire, we're just trying to get those raw damage hit up as high as possible. There was a 325k slash tick in there. We're going for the 1 tap or the 1 shot with a single tick. And you're trying to hit the Acolyte with all 3 of the grenades. You can hit it point blank if you want. Just make sure you're aiming with scope. You want to hit it with as many of the grenades as possible. And make sure you can hit all of the AoEs. So it's pretty simple. The AoEs are pretty big. But this is more or less what the build is. A Riven does in fact help this out a ton. But my Riven is useless in this scenario. Because mine's for the primary fire with like a little bit of the secondary. So, pretty basic. If you enjoy using the Trumna to one-shot Acolytes, and frankly, who wouldn't, you would build it up using like Galvanized scope. And you could prime a little bit, you don't need a lot, and then just blast it with the alt fire. Obviously, Galvanized aptitude isn't going to help you out a ton. With the AoE, it's not going to do shit. But the direct impact is obviously gravy, right? So, these are your variations. Now let's talk about Rivens. Because Rivens help out this thing so much, it's kind of hilarious. So we have our standard Steel Path build. I've got a crit chance, fire rate, reload speed. I actually swap out Stormbringer for the 60-60, and I actually move critical delay over. And normally what I'm running is I'll run something like this. Little bit higher crit chance. The crit chance does get bumped on the alt fire, which does help out a ton. And I'll run dual 60-60s is generally what I use for super quick priming. The strip is really, really nice. And even against like 400s or 500s, which is as high as I've taken this up to, I can vouch like something like this would work. Like it's got heat, innate, impact, obviously is on it, but it's just the only form of IPS that it's got. Priming helps this weapon out so much because it doesn't have the elements and the physical damage on the primary fire to begin with. But it's just a really solid, well-rounded weapon. And the synth set is the trick to getting this to work a little more appropriately. And with Merciless, you can get the reload down to 3 if you got a Riven with reload. Even with that, to be honest, the synth set is still just way better. If you don't want to run 100 munitions for whatever, just to talk about this also, I actually prefer, and I've done this when doing like heat inherit builds, right? Where is that mod? Wildfire. And shred. Right? You get your heat weighting back, you get a little bit of an elemental bonus on it. And for the synth set, the magazine reload per second is affected by the total magazine, so the wildfire increases how much ammo is being reloaded. A little bit. It's nice, but it is there, right? So I've done like what you would do like a Garuda, right? Like Garuda doesn't need 100 munitions on her weapon. So with something like that, like I've done this and used like a Garuda Talon for build, right? So this works also in terms of variations. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, and this will be our final thing. We'll take our very blinged out Zephyr. Ew. We'll get a little bit of range on, nothing crazy. And some duration. Alright, so the AoEs... this weapon stacks incredibly well with Zephyr. And it's because you have multiple grenades going off. And the grenades hit the enemies, hit the tornadoes, and it all sort of multiplies together. So as with everything, Zephyr is completely broken. With this, let me get an acceleration on here so we don't die from boredom. Alright, so easy enough. Oh. I held it too long, hold on. Actually, you know what, let's just reset them. I held the button too long. There we go. Alright, so we got our group. Got our tornadoes. And we got our alt fire. So they fixed the infinitely reloading. But they can't do anything, because what it used to do is you used to be able to alt fire into the tornadoes. And because the tornadoes count as like its own damage source, it would reload the Trumna alt fire, and you could just spam the shit out of it. It was like an instant level cap setup. But obviously they fixed the nerf, right? Thank God. We don't want Zephyr having too much fun. But the fact is that it's still an insane damage multiplier, right? Because each of the tornadoes get hit by the AoE. The Trumna has the range, maybe, depending on how high the enemy is up. And actually, let's just go ahead and test that instead of sitting here talking about it. How high are these guys up? Yeah, so if you put it right down at the bottom of them... Oh, give me the enemy. Come on. Yeah, so if you alt fire this, the AoE on the Trumna is 6 meters, right? So if you alt fire underneath the tornadoes, it hits all of the enemies and all of the tornadoes at the same time. So it ends up being a massive damage multiplier. So for you burb enjoyers, this is an incredibly strong weapon with Zephyr. Not that Zephyr had a big issue with weapon damage to begin with, but this weapon is probably strongest. Of course, I lost my energy. I didn't bring flow. Hold on. Is probably strongest with Zephyr. And then the bounces on top of it. Yeah, and everything just kind of dies. So food for thought. It's really, really good to stack with. Obviously, things like Nourish, Roar, Eclipse all do well with the weapon. And that's basically it. Like, the weapon is incredibly strong. But the hottest take that I got is make sure to use the Synth set and swap back and forth between the Trumna and like your secondary to Prime. Or bring a secondary that you like using. Like, I really like using the Seer occasionally. But it's got a tiny magazine. But it does high damage. So you can swap between the Trumna and the Seer, even with like 2 synth mods. And you can keep your ammo up pretty readily. It'll reload pretty fast. And you'll never have to reload. Because the synth set will be doing it for you. So it is what it is. But I hope this helps. A couple of different explanations. I can't recommend the Corrosive build. Just kind of skip the heat build unless you want to hyper focus on the heat. In which case, it's a 90 mod for heat, a 60-60. And I would say even like the magazine. Or obviously if you're doing like a full heat build. Not 100 meters, but a faction mod. Instead of that. And I can show you that because the weapon's so heavily weighted heat. It would also be pretty viable. Not appearance. Especially with like a heat inherit setup. So you would have, say, Grenier, Hellfire. Then you would do your choice of fire rate. And you could either do Wildfire or 60-60. It's up to you. Obviously, if you're doing like a level cap or something like that, you want to go with Thermite. Just for the status chance boost, because you're relying on procs to do damage. I would recommend this. So it would be something like this that you would go for. And you would kind of use it like a primary fire. Like, it would be kind of like an Ignis at that point, like an upgraded Ignis. But obviously, it's not a flamethrower. But you could do like a heat inherit build with this, and it would work pretty well. But anyway, I hope this was helpful. Questions, comments, concerns, make sure to leave a comment down below. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. And also, final thing, the Rivens for these things are dirt ass cheap. And right now, there is a 25 plat Riven from a guy named Squeegee, which is viral and faction damage to Grenier with a relatively harmless status, minus status chance. For 25 plat. So make sure to check Warframe Market. There's also for 100p. Checking out the Toxin Rivens. Toxin crit chance damage to Grenier. 100p. Saves you a mod slot. So it is what it is. These Rivens are super cheap. Even to just have something as like part of the arsenal, I can't recommend the Trumna enough. It's a super fun weapon to use, and obviously that alt fire hits like a fucking truck, and that's just, it feels pretty cool. But anyway, take it easy, guys. Have a blessed day.